We're in the middle of a global pandemic that is forcing voters to choose between their health and their vote. Are absentee ballots, or better known as mail-in ballots, an essential way to vote for millions of Americans right now?
That's a matter of policy on which I can't express a view.
Okay, to me, that just feels like a fundamental part of our democracy. But okay, let's try this. Have you ever voted by mail?
I can't recall a time that I voted by mail. It may be in college that I did when I was living away from home, but I can't, as I'm sitting here, specifically recall a time I voted by mail.
Do you have friends or family that have voted by mail or are voting by mail?
I have had friends or family vote by mail.
And you understand we're operating in a moment where the president is undermining vote by mail, even though a number of Republican governors and Republican senators are supportive of it. Many argue that Bush v. Gore, and back to your earlier work, hurt the court's legitimacy. If you are confirmed, the Supreme Court will have not one, not two, but 3 justices, you, Justice Kavanaugh, and Chief Justice Roberts, who worked on behalf of the Republican Party in matters related to the Bush v. Gore case. Do you think that that's a coincidence?
Senator Klobuchar, if you're asking me whether I was nominated for this seat because I worked on Bush versus Gore for a very brief period of time as a young associate, that doesn't make sense to me. I just think it's such a coincidence to me. I actually didn't know it until yesterday. But will having justices with this background, 2 of whom were appointed by the current president, decide any cases related to the upcoming election, do you think that will undermine the legitimacy of the court? Asking whether something would undermine the legitimacy of the court or not seems to be trying to elicit a question about whether it would be appropriate for justices who participated in that litigation to sit on the case rather than recuse. And I went down that road yesterday saying it's a legal question. You said you wouldn't recuse. That's why I thought it was so. That isn't what I said. I said I wouldn't commit. I wouldn't pre-commit. You're right. You said you wouldn't announce your decision on recusal, and you wouldn't commit to recusing. But again, I think the public has a right to know that now 3 of these justices have worked on the Republican side on a major issue related to a presidential election. One thing I wanted to revisit quickly, Smiley v. Home. The reason I asked about that is that this would be unprecedented when right now we're in an unprecedented time where we have a president who refuses to commit to a peaceful transfer of power, working to undermine the integrity of this election. And yesterday you wouldn't commit to recuse yourself from the case we just talked about, but now we're considering your confirmation to the highest court in the land in the midst of this election. And in Smiley v. Home, where the Supreme Court held that a governor is part of the legislative process, and therefore a legislature cannot unilaterally change election rules, that could be very important because we have a number of swing states where we have legislature of one party, governor of the other. And we have this precedent that has been on the books for nearly 90 years. Do you think that that is established Supreme Court precedent? It said that a governor is part of the legislative process. I actually am not familiar with that case, but it is precedent. Obviously, it's a precedent of the court. Okay. I wanted to turn to one last issue, and that is First Amendment and freedom of the press, near and dear to my heart. My dad was a journalist. He would go everywhere for a good story and cared a lot about freedom of the press. And regrettably, our right to a free and independent press is under assault. We have witnessed unprecedented attacks on journalists and journalism in the past several years. Our president frequently uses his Twitter account to attack news organizations. He has accused the media of being fake news and called them the enemy of the people. Obviously, we also have journalists overseas that are under attack by dictators. I want to pay special tribute to those brave journalists whose dogged pursuit of the truth never wavered despite threats of imprisonment, violence, and even death. Journalists like Jamal Khashoggi and the men and women of the Capital Gazette. Their legacy is proof that fear will not silence facts.
The founders recognized that a free press is vital to a vibrant and strong democracy, and that's why we need Supreme Court justices who understand the importance of protecting the right of journalists. First Time v. Sullivan, you know that's a landmark ruling and with the support of the First Amendment protections for the press and protecting journalists unless they say something untrue with actual malice. Justice Thomas has expressed skepticism with that case, writing in his concurrence in McGee v. Cosby that if the Constitution does not require public figures to satisfy an actual malice standard in state law defamation suits, then neither should we. Do you agree with Justice Thomas that the court should reconsider the actual malice standard because it is inconsistent with the original meaning of the Constitution?
Well, Senator Klobuchar, I can't really express a view on either New York Times v. Sullivan or Justice Thomas's critique of it without violating the principle that I've repeatedly stated that all nominees follow, that, I can't comment on matters of litigation or grade precedents that the court has already decided.
I also want to ask you about how journalists have been deterred from doing their jobs under the threat of jail time. After the Supreme Court's 1972 decision in Brandsburg v. Hayes, many federal courts of appeals have recognized what's called the reporter's privilege, which protects a reporter's First Amendment right to protect his or her sources from disclosure in certain circumstances. The Seventh Circuit, by the way, on which you serve, has rejected a constitutional basis for a reporter's privilege. Under its original public meaning, does the First Amendment protect a reporter's decision to protect a confidential source?
Well, again, that would be eliciting a legal conclusion from me, which I can't answer in a hypothetical form in the hearing. It's also a question, as you point out, that's closely related to the ones that are being litigated.
Okay, one last try. Do you agree that if reporters cannot protect their sources, they are less likely to be able to find confidential witnesses willing to share information, confidential informers willing to share information about issues of public importance?
Well, Senator, that would both be a policy question, a matter of public policy, which I can't express a view on, and presumably also one that might factor into the question of what the First Amendment protects. So, again, that's not something that I can give an opinion on in this context.
Okay. I guess my last thing I'll just say is I hope people watching out there are going to follow the tracks of this record and are going to vote.